Have you ever noticed that the most powerful people in the room often speak the least about themselves? Have you noticed that the people who lose influence are usually not defeated by enemies? They are defeated by a single moment of honesty, one careless answer, one unnecessary confession, one emotional reaction, and suddenly, the respect they spent years building disappears in minutes. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something terrifying about human nature. People do not simply listen to your answers, they measure you through them. Every question is a hidden test. Every conversation is a battlefield disguised as friendship. Every answer reveals a weakness, a desire, a fear, or a strategy. And once people discover what drives you, they can predict you. And once they can predict you, they can control you. Today we are exploring 5 questions that Machiavelli would advise you to treat with extreme caution. Questions that appear innocent. Questions that sound friendly. Questions that many people answer without hesitation. Yet these questions have destroyed careers, relationships, reputations, and even kingdoms. Because in the game of power, information is never free. The person asking the question often gains more than the person answering it. So before you reveal yourself too quickly, before you expose your mind to people who have not earned your trust, listen carefully, because after today, you may never answer these questions the same way again. To understand why, we must travel back to Renaissance Italy, a world of betrayal, a world of political intrigue, a world where smiling faces often concealed sharpened knives. In the city of Florence lived a man named Niccolò Machiavelli. For years he served as a diplomat. He negotiated with kings. He observed generals. He studied rulers. He watched republics rise and collapse. He witnessed alliances formed in the morning and broken by sunset. He learned that power rarely belongs to the strongest. It belongs to the person who understands human nature. And human nature, according to Machiavelli, possesses a dangerous habit. People are curious, not because they care, but because information gives them leverage. The more they know about you, the less they fear you. The less they fear you, the easier you become to manipulate. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized the importance of prudence, reputation, and controlling what others know about your intentions. A ruler's survival often depended on managing appearances and avoiding unnecessary vulnerabilities. Imagine a young nobleman entering a royal court. He is intelligent, ambitious, confident. He believes honesty is always respected. When courtiers ask about his dreams, he reveals everything. When they ask about his plans, he explains every detail. When they ask who he trusts, he tells them. When they ask who he dislikes, he tells them that too. He feels proud of his openness. He thinks transparency creates allies. But weeks later, something strange happens. His rivals know exactly how to stop him. They know what opportunities tempt him. They know what fears motivate him. They know which relationships matter most. Without realizing it, he has handed them a map to his mind, and now they can attack him without resistance. This is the first lesson of power. Information flows in one direction. The wise gather more than they reveal. The foolish reveal more than they gather. Which brings us to the first dangerous question. The first question Machiavelli would advise you never to answer directly. What is your biggest goal? At first, this question sounds harmless. In fact, modern society encourages people to answer it. Motivational speakers praise transparency. Social media rewards public declarations. Everyone is encouraged to announce their dreams. But Machiavelli would ask a simple question. Why? Why reveal your destination before you arrive? Imagine a hunter walking through a forest. Would he announce where he plans to place his traps? Would a general reveal his battle strategy before the war begins? Would a chess master explain his next 10 moves to his opponent? Of course not, because strategy loses power when exposed. Yet people do this every day. They reveal business plans, career ambitions, financial goals, relationship intentions, personal dreams. Then they wonder why resistance suddenly appears. The moment people know your destination, they can choose one of three reactions. Some will compete with you. Some will sabotage you. Some will pretend to support you while quietly preparing obstacles. Not because they are evil, because human beings compare themselves to others. And nothing triggers comparison more than ambition. Machiavelli understood that appearances often matter more than declarations. He argued that successful leaders protect their position through prudence and careful management of perception rather than revealing every intention. There is another reason this question is dangerous. Most goals fail in their early stages. Dreams are fragile. Like a flame in the wind, when you expose a new ambition too early, you invite opinions, doubts, criticism, mockery. And even if people never say these things aloud, their reactions influence your confidence. A dream protected in silence grows stronger. A dream exposed too early often dies. Consider the story of a young merchant in Florence. He wanted to build the largest trading company in the city. Excited by his vision, he told everyone, friends, family, business partners, competitors. For months he described his future empire. People smiled, they applauded, they encouraged him. But behind closed doors they laughed. Some copied his ideas, others blocked his opportunities. A few secretly formed partnerships, specifically to limit his influence. Years later he realized something painful. The greatest damage did not come from enemies. It came from revealing his intentions before he possessed the strength to protect them. Meanwhile, another merchant worked quietly. He spoke little, promised nothing, announced nothing. People ignored him. They underestimated him. And because they underestimated him, they left him alone. 5 years later, he controlled routes that nobody realized he was building. His success appeared sudden, but it was not sudden. It was silent. And silence is often the greatest ally of power. This does not mean you must become secretive or paranoid. It means you must become selective. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves knowledge of your ambitions. Not everyone has earned the right to know what you are building. The modern world encourages oversharing. Machiavelli would encourage restraint, because power grows best in the shadows, before it emerges into the light. The strongest tree begins underground. The strongest strategy develops unseen. The strongest ambition often moves quietly until success makes explanation unnecessary. So the next time someone asks, "What is your biggest goal?" Pause before answering. Ask yourself a question. Does this person need this information? Or am I giving away a piece of my future for free? Because once spoken, information cannot be retrieved. And some people are not listening to support your dream. They are listening to measure it, and perhaps stop it. The second dangerous question is even more deceptive. It appears during casual conversations, friendly gatherings, workplace discussions, family events. A simple question that has destroyed countless reputations. The question is, what do you really think about him? And that question is where the trap begins. The question is, what do you really think about him? And that question is where the trap begins. Notice how often this happens. Someone leans closer. Their voice becomes quieter. Their expression becomes friendly. Then they ask, be honest, what do you really think about him, or her, or them? The question feels harmless, almost intimate, as though you are being invited into a circle of trust. But Machiavelli would immediately recognize the danger, because the person asking for your opinion is often gathering information, not sharing loyalty. The moment you answer carelessly, you expose something far more valuable than your opinion. You expose your judgment, your emotions, your alliances, your weaknesses, and most importantly, you expose your enemies. Machiavelli repeatedly warned rulers about information, advisors, and the danger of revealing too much. He emphasized prudence and control over what others learn about your intentions and relationships. Imagine a royal court in Florence. A young advisor serves a powerful duke. He is intelligent, talented, respected. One afternoon, another courtier approaches him. They exchange compliments, discuss politics. laugh together. Then comes the question, what do you think about Lord Alessandro? The advisor hesitates, but eventually he answers. He explains that Alessandro is ambitious, arrogant, dangerous. The conversation ends. Nothing happens. Days pass, weeks pass. Then suddenly the Duke summons him. The advisor enters the chamber, confused, nervous, and standing beside the Duke is Lord Alessandro. Every criticism, every observation, every careless word has somehow returned to its target. The advisor spends months trying to repair damage that took only seconds to create. This is one of humanity's oldest games. People often ask for opinions they already possess, not to learn, but to verify, to compare, to test, and sometimes to expose. The wise understand a painful truth. Most conflicts begin not because of actions, but because of words. A sword wounds one person. A sentence can wound 10. A rumor can wound 100. A careless opinion can follow you for years. That is why powerful individuals develop a habit. When invited to criticize others, they become difficult to read. Not dishonest, not deceptive, simply disciplined. Instead of attacking people, they discuss situations. Instead of revealing emotional judgments, they focus on facts. Instead of feeding gossip, they starve it. Because once your opinion leaves your mouth, it no longer belongs to you. Now it belongs to everyone who hears it, and every listener may use it differently. Some will repeat it. Some will distort it. Some will weaponize it. Some will simply remember it until the perfect moment arrives. Machiavelli understood that reputation is a form of power, and reputation can be damaged by your enemies. But it can also be damaged by your own tongue. Many people lose influence because they cannot resist the temptation to speak. They believe every opinion deserves expression. Every emotion deserves release. Every frustration deserves an audience. Then they wonder why trust disappears. A philosopher once said that silence is sometimes the loudest form of intelligence. Machiavelli would likely agree, not because silence is always virtuous, but because silence preserves options. Words create commitments. Silence preserves freedom. So when someone asks, "What do you really think about him?" remember, you may not be answering a question. You may be taking a test, and the safest answer is often the one that reveals the least. Which brings us to the third dangerous question. A question so common that most people answer it automatically, yet it reveals more about your vulnerabilities than almost any other question. The question is, what is your biggest weakness? Modern culture loves this question. Employers ask it. Friends ask it. Partners ask it. Strangers ask it. Everyone wants to know your weakness, and they usually present the question as an opportunity for honesty, for authenticity, for self-awareness. But Machiavelli would immediately ask, why should someone possess a map of your weaknesses? Imagine two generals preparing for battle. One general studies the enemy. The other studies the enemy and then announces his own vulnerabilities. Which one survives? The answer is obvious. Yet people reveal weaknesses every day. They discuss insecurities, financial fears, emotional wounds, personal doubts, past failures, trusting that vulnerability will always produce understanding. Sometimes it does, but not always. Human nature is more complicated. The same information that inspires compassion in one person may inspire exploitation in another. Machiavelli spent years observing courts filled with ambitious individuals. He understood something uncomfortable. Many people sympathize with weakness publicly, but calculate around it privately. The moment people discover what frightens you, they know where to apply pressure. The moment they discover what makes you insecure, they know where to aim criticism. The moment they discover what you desperately want to hide, they know how to influence you. This does not mean you should pretend to be perfect. Perfection is unbelievable. Perfection creates distance, but there is a difference between honesty and exposure, a difference between transparency and surrender. The wise reveal themselves gradually, as trust is earned, not because they are manipulative, but because trust itself is valuable. Think of a castle. A castle does not open every gate to every traveler. Access is earned, step by step, room by room. The strongest minds operate the same way. Machiavelli famously focused on prudence, necessity, and the management of appearances. He argued that successful leaders understood when to reveal and when to conceal information. Consider a young businessman named Lorenzo. Early in his career, he wanted to be liked, so he shared everything. His fears, his doubts, his insecurities, his struggles with confidence. People praised his honesty, but something unexpected happened. When promotions appeared, others quietly questioned his leadership. When opportunities emerged, people remembered his doubts more than his strengths. The image he had created became stronger than the reality. Years later, Lorenzo learned a difficult lesson. People often remember your weaknesses longer than your explanations. From that day forward, he remained genuine, but selective, open, but strategic, honest, but careful, and his influence began to grow. Because confidence is not pretending to have no weaknesses. Confidence is refusing to let weaknesses define you. There is another hidden danger inside this question. The more you speak about your limitations, the more your mind begins to identify with them. You stop saying, "I have fears," and begin believing, "I am fearful." You stop saying, "I struggle sometimes," and begin believing, "I am weak." Identity follows repetition. The stories you tell about yourself eventually become the person you see in the mirror. Machiavelli understood that perception shapes reality. Not only other people's perception of you, but your own perception as well. So when someone asks, "What is your biggest weakness?" be careful, not because you should lie, but because not every person deserves access to your private battles. Some people will help carry your burdens. Others will simply measure them, and the difference is not always visible at first glance. Now, the fourth dangerous question is perhaps the most seductive of all, because it appeals directly to the ego. It sounds flattering. It sounds exciting. It sounds harmless. Yet countless people have destroyed themselves by answering it. The question is, what would you do if you had unlimited power? And that is where our next lesson begins. The question is, what would you do if you had unlimited power? And that is where our next lesson begins. At first glance, this sounds like a harmless thought experiment, a playful conversation, a chance to imagine possibilities. But beneath the surface, it reveals something dangerous. Because whenever people ask this question, they are rarely listening to your answer. They are listening to your character, your ambitions, your impulses, your hidden desires, your relationship with control. Machiavelli spent his life observing rulers, kings, generals, statesmen, men who possessed immense power. And he discovered something fascinating. The people most obsessed with power were usually the least prepared to wield it, while those capable of wielding power effectively rarely spoke about it. Imagine a banquet in Renaissance Florence. Merchants, nobles, military commanders, and politicians sit around a long wooden table. Wine flows freely. Laughter fills the room. Then someone asks, "If you ruled Florence, what would you do?" One man immediately begins talking. He would punish his enemies, silence his critics, reward his supporters, force everyone to respect him. As he speaks, he feels powerful, important, dominant. But the experienced men at the table exchange silent glances, because the young man has unknowingly revealed something. He is ruled by emotion, not judgment. His vision of power is actually a vision of revenge. And revenge is one of the easiest weaknesses to manipulate. Machiavelli understood that power does not reveal character. Power magnifies character. If a person is ruled by fear, power magnifies fear. If a person is ruled by insecurity, power magnifies insecurity. If a person is ruled by ego, power magnifies ego. This is why wise people become cautious whenever discussions turn toward authority, because your fantasies often expose the motivations you try hardest to hide. Consider the story of a young military officer, ambitious, talented, determined. One evening he sits with senior commanders. The conversation turns toward leadership. Someone asks, "What would you do if you commanded the entire army?" The young officer speaks for nearly an hour. He describes grand victories, bold conquests, punishments for rivals, rewards for loyal followers. The room listens patiently. Months later, a promotion opportunity appears, and strangely, he is overlooked. Confused, he asks why. An older commander gives him an answer he never forgets. "You spoke about power as though it existed to serve you." The officer had mistaken authority for personal gratification. True leaders understand something different. Power exists to solve problems, to create order, to protect stability, to accomplish objectives. The moment power becomes an extension of personal ego, it becomes dangerous. This is why Machiavelli constantly focused on results rather than fantasies, reality rather than imagination, effectiveness rather than self-indulgence. The most dangerous part of this question is not the answer itself. It is the emotional state it creates. People become intoxicated by hypothetical authority. They begin revealing desires they would normally conceal. They expose grudges, resentments, vanity, pride, and every person listening learns something valuable. The wise understand that power is demonstrated through action, not through stories about what they would do. So when someone asks, "What would you do if you had unlimited power?" Be careful, because your answer may reveal more about your weaknesses than your strengths. And now we arrive at the fifth and final question, perhaps the most dangerous question of all. A question that appears innocent, a question that sounds caring, a question that millions of people answer every day, without realizing the cost. The question is, what is your biggest fear? Human beings are naturally drawn toward this question. We want connection, understanding, intimacy, trust, and fear seems like the shortest path to all of them. But Machiavelli observed a reality that most people prefer not to acknowledge. The moment someone understands your deepest fear, they possess extraordinary influence over you. Fear shapes decisions. Fear shapes behavior. Fear shapes destiny. The person who understands your fear often understands your future. Imagine a prince ruling a small Italian city. His enemies study him constantly. They do not focus on his strengths. They focus on his fears. What does he fear losing? What threatens him? What keeps him awake at night? Because once they discover the answer, they discover the key to controlling him. A man afraid of poverty can be bought. A man afraid of loneliness can be manipulated. A man afraid of failure can be pressured. A man afraid of rejection can be controlled through approval. Fear creates invisible chains, and those chains are often stronger than iron. There was once a wealthy merchant who seemed unstoppable. His business expanded every year. His influence grew. His reputation flourished. People admired him. Competitors feared him. Yet hidden beneath his success was a secret fear. He feared humiliation, more than financial loss, more than competition, more than failure. Humiliation terrified him. Eventually, a rival discovered this weakness, and instead of attacking the merchant's wealth, he attacked his reputation. Whispers, rumors, public embarrassment. The merchant became desperate. He made irrational decisions, poor investments, emotional reactions, strategic mistakes. Within 2 years, he destroyed himself, not because his rival was stronger, because his rival understood his fear. Machiavelli understood that people are often conquered internally before they are conquered externally. The greatest battlefield is the human mind. The greatest fortress is self-mastery. The greatest freedom is independence from fear. This does not mean pretending you have no fears. Everyone has fears, even kings, even generals, even philosophers. The difference is that wise people examine their fears privately before exposing them publicly. They understand that self-knowledge is powerful, but self-exposure is not always wise.
There is a profound difference between knowing your weakness and advertising it.
The first creates strength. The second creates vulnerability. That is why the strongest individuals throughout history developed a habit of emotional discipline. They learned to understand themselves deeply, without revealing themselves carelessly. And that brings us to the final lesson. Many people misunderstand Machiavelli. They imagine he taught manipulation, deception, ruthlessness. But beneath all his observations lies a deeper message. Human beings live in a world where appearances matter. Reputation matters, information matters, perception matters. The person who reveals everything becomes predictable. The person who becomes predictable becomes vulnerable. And the person who becomes vulnerable eventually loses influence. This is why the most powerful people are often difficult to read. Not because they are dishonest, because they understand value. And information is valuable. Your dreams are valuable. Your fears are valuable. Your ambitions are valuable. Your thoughts are valuable. Your future is valuable. Not everyone deserves access to them. So remember these 5 questions. What is your biggest goal? What do you really think about him? What is your biggest weakness? What would you do if you had unlimited power? What is your biggest fear? The next time someone asks one of these questions, pause, think, observe, because every answer reveals a piece of your mind, and every piece of your mind becomes power in someone else's hands. Machiavelli learned this lesson while watching kingdoms rise and fall. Some rulers lost armies, some lost wealth, some lost territory, but nearly all of them lost something first. Control of information. The moment they revealed too much, others began writing their future for them. The wise do not rush to speak. They do not feel compelled to explain themselves. They do not reveal every dream, every fear, every strategy, every opinion. They understand that mystery creates space. Space creates influence, and influence creates power. In a world where everyone is desperate to be seen, the rarest skill is knowing what should remain unseen. And perhaps that is the greatest Machiavellian lesson of all. Not every question deserves an answer, and not every truth deserves an audience. Because sometimes the strongest response is silence. But before you leave, before you close this video and return to the noise of everyday life, there is one final truth you must understand. Many people will hear these 5 questions and immediately think this video is about deception, about manipulation, about hiding from the world. But that would be a shallow interpretation, and Machiavelli never survived by being shallow. The deeper lesson is not to become secretive. The deeper lesson is to become valuable, because valuable things are protected. Gold is protected. Treasures are protected. Kingdoms are protected, and your mind deserves the same protection. The modern world teaches the opposite. It rewards instant disclosure, instant opinions, instant reactions, instant vulnerability. People are encouraged to reveal everything: their goals, their fears, their plans, their emotions, their weaknesses, as if transparency itself were wisdom. But Machiavelli observed reality, not fantasy. He looked at the world as it was, not as people wished it to be. And reality taught him something that remains true even today. Information creates power. The person who knows more often controls more. The person who reveals less often preserves more. That is why kings protected state secrets. That is why generals concealed battle plans. That is why great negotiators never reveal their final position. And that is why wise individuals learn the discipline of selective silence, not because they fear people, because they understand people. Remember the 5 questions. The first question was, what is your biggest goal? Because when you reveal your destination too early, you expose your strategy before your position is secure. Dreams grow stronger in silence. The second question was, what do you really think about him? Because opinions are dangerous currency. The moment they leave your mouth, they stop belonging to you. And sooner or later, they often return. The third question was, what is your biggest weakness? Because not everyone who asks deserves access to your wounds. Trust should be earned, not granted automatically. The fourth question was, what would you do if you had unlimited power? Because fantasies about power reveal character, and character is often exposed most clearly when imagination removes consequences. And finally, the fifth question, what is your biggest fear? Because the person who understands your deepest fear may eventually understand how to control you. 5 questions, 5 traps, 5 opportunities to protect your influence. But beneath all 5 lies a single principle. Guard your inner world. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized prudence, reputation, and managing appearances rather than exposing every intention to others. Successful leaders protected information and revealed only what circumstances required. Think about the most respected people you have ever met. The most powerful, the most influential, the most confident. What do they have in common? Usually it is not wealth, not status, not intelligence. It is composure. They are difficult to provoke, difficult to read, difficult to manipulate, not because they are pretending, but because they possess mastery over themselves. Most people spend their lives trying to control others. The wise focus on controlling themselves. Most people react. The wise observe. Most people rush to explain. The wise understand that explanation is often unnecessary. Most people speak to fill silence. The wise use silence to gather information, and that difference changes everything. A lion does not announce its strength. A mountain does not announce its size. An ocean does not announce its depth. Their presence speaks for them. The same is true for truly powerful individuals. They do not need to reveal every ambition, every opinion, every fear, every plan. They allow results to speak, and results speak louder than words ever can. Perhaps this is why so many people misunderstand Machiavelli. They see manipulation, but overlook discipline. They see strategy, but overlook self-control. They see power, but overlook responsibility. Because real power is not the ability to dominate others. Real power is the ability to remain sovereign over yourself, to choose what enters your mind, to choose what leaves your mouth, to choose what becomes visible to the world, and in an age where everyone is desperate for attention. That kind of discipline becomes rare. Rare things become valuable, and valuable things become powerful. So the next time someone asks one of these questions, pause, observe, think. Not every question deserves an immediate answer. Not every curiosity deserves satisfaction. Not every audience deserves access to your private world. Some dreams should remain protected. Some fears should remain private. Some strategies should remain hidden until the right moment arrives, because history has always belonged to those who understood timing. And timing begins with silence. Machiavelli once focused on what he called the effectual truth of things, the reality of how people and power actually operate, rather than how we wish they operated. Prudence, reputation, and judgment mattered more than appearances of innocence alone. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: the strongest person in the room is not always the loudest, not always the richest, not always the most admired. Sometimes, the strongest person in the room is the one who knows exactly what to say, exactly what not to say, and the difference between the two. Because in the end, your words create your image. Your image shapes your influence. Your influence shapes your destiny. Protect it wisely. And remember, not every truth deserves an audience. Not every question deserves an answer. And sometimes, silence is the most powerful answer of all. If this video changed the way you see human nature, leave a comment below with the word silence. Subscribe for more lessons from Machiavelli, Nietzsche, Sun Tzu, and the greatest minds in history. And until next time, guard your mind, guard your words, and never give away power for free.